Those of you who trapped beaver this year in March probably had a hard time finding a place to make a set. I did. That lower Wisconsin Riverway, the islands were underwater for 3 months starting in March. So I made floats this year. I've always messed around with floats a little bit, but I got a little more ambitious than normal. And it's nothing more than 2x4s sandwiching some foam here for flotation. And the theory is, and I'll say theory because it's an idea, but this one's a good theory. You take your 330, and I'm going to put the safety gripper on here on the bottom jaws, because the bottom jaws are going to become my top jaws. And Belial's are a little bit wider. Okay, so I've got these 2x4s just the right distance apart. Now I got to work these safeties out. Belial's a Canadian trap. I love these traps. And those safety hooks are very secure, but sometimes they're just a little bit of a pain to get out of the way. Fold those back. And I put this on here upside down so that the trigger is not in the face of that beaver. And here, I've got the cable S-hooked to an eye bolt in the front, and then I've got varying lengths of cable that I S-hook onto here up onto the bank or a tree limb that I hang out over the river. And right here I'm going to put a pile of mud with a little beaver caster. You can see the trigger sticking up here, and I got that off to the side, and I got holes drilled in the top of this float. And that's for these sticks here, so Mr. Beaver doesn't decide to try and climb over the side and get to the caster that way. And also I think it deters any ducks from wanting to land on there and really mess things up. Now I've got these V-shaped because I trap moving water, not ponds. So this would go into the current facing upstream, and usually I got it just out from the bank here so that those beaver will go in there and check it out. Let's remember what's happening in March. You got a lot of debris coming down the river. You got ice chunks. I want this cabled off to something solid. You know, you might have a 5-foot rise in water in a couple of days for some unknown reason, and that's all going to get blown downstream.
And I see that you have little staples in between the sticks. What are those for?
Ooh, all my secrets. I take about 4 or 5 freshly peeled willow sticks, wire them together, and then I wire them in the middle at make an X. Oh. Yeah. So the combination of the caster and fresh green is appealing. And of course the last thing you do is take that safety gripper off.
Have you ever caught an otter in that set?
Never have.
I have seen something very similar to that for otter, and they're using otter gland and fish. They have sort of almost a little house on the front part of it, so that the fish is not sight exposed.
Okay.
That was his otter set.
Oh.
And he could plop it down anywhere. He didn't need to do anything other than plop it in the water and walk away from it.
Yeah.
And he had it made for 160 was his trap.
Cool. So here's my muskrat float. Same situation. Maybe we got an early ice out and the water's up. And I got muskrats all over the place, but I can't make a set. So I made these muskrat floats. Again, these are V-shaped, and you don't have to get too fancy with your traps. I like to just use old long springs, and I got them bolted right in there Set that on here, put some vegetation in there, move your sticks to these holes. Same concept. Keeps the ducks off of here, keeps the geese from wanting to come up there, and it keeps those muskrats from crawling up the sides. And V shape, because I run these in the current, and I'll anchor these off to whatever. And those muskrats, you can have that trap exposed and they don't mind it. They'll get in there and fall over and drown. When I trapped up in Baraboo, I trapped a lot of drainage ditches, and those culvert tubes would sometimes be 10 to 15 to 20 feet long depending on the width of the road. And I would tie these together like battleships and let them go one after the other, and sometimes I'd have 5 of these floating in a row all tied to one another, and I'd pull them up and I would take muskrats off of each one, because at night they'll be going up through there and coming up there to rest. Just some options, a lot of gear to haul around, but under the right conditions, these will work real well for you.
So you can use this beaver for a caster mount set, but you could also make it a baited set or a baited caster mount set.
Yep, and I do both. I want that beaver to come into it. To them, it's a foreign beaver. I'm going to check it out. And they'll go right through that 330. And the nice thing with the float is, with your water conditions that are constantly changing, it is always at least half submerged. I don't have to worry about this thing, you know, being totally out of the water. You can even stick this into the weeds and the rushes on the side, have it pointing out, and it'll still float up and down with that. So it's kind of one of those sets where if you've got the room in your garage or fur shed or whatever to store them, that's good. I learned the hard way one year. I left 50 of these underneath a tarp, the muskrat floats, at my buddy's farm to use the next year, and when I pulled the tarp off, I noticed that the carpenter ants had a field day with my floats, and I had to remake them. So just something else to use.